morning, good afternoon, and good evening from wherever you're listening in the world to this podcast today. My name's Paul Webb. I am the founder of B2B Energy, and you are listening to Energy Speaks Back. And good evening, everybody, and welcome to Energy Speaks Back. I'm Paul Webb, founder of B2B Energy and of this podcast. And I'm joined today by a close friend of mine, Lewis Giles. Hi, Lewis. How are you?
Hi, Paul. How are you doing? Thanks for having me on the podcast. It's great to be here and looking forward to having a chat.
Brilliant. So it's really strange how we met, Lewis, because we probably live, bizarrely, I talk to people all over the world, but you only live a mile away from where I live on our beautiful island, Canvey Island. Bizarre how we met. We met through BNI.
Yeah.
Being in lockdown has been quite a bizarre time, actually, because we were saying only this morning that we get the 5:20 train every morning, and 6:30 we're having coffee in Costa, but not at the moment.
No such joys at the moment, Paul. It's all a bit up in the air at the moment, isn't it? And but no, like you say, live within a mile of each other, never met before, and then met at BNI, and as they say, the rest is history.
Excellent. So, Lewis, before we go into detail on today's podcast, tell us a little bit about yourself and about your company, AM Planned Maintenance.
Well, we're an independent family-run business, Paul. And family is at the core of our business. It was started over 30 odd years ago by my granddad, Alan Jones, who's a time-served LEB linesman electrician, who then sort of decided to branch out into heavy industrial, electrical, refrigeration and mechanical, but he worked all over the place, putting up silos, done a stint in Nigeria and worked in Nigeria for 5 years on assembling factories and teaching over there how to set up the machinery, and came back and then moved into more the retail sector, providing reactive breakdown emergency maintenance and branching out from electrical into all trades, and then it sort of moved on from there. My dad's involved in the business, my brother's involved in the business, my mum's involved in the business. We are an out-and-out family business. We've got just under 40 odd mobile engineers at the moment, and we cover a large area of the southeast of England, providing 4-hour emergency round-the-clock response maintenance to well-known brands, facilities companies, both in the residential management and commercial sectors, covering all basically. When the proverbial hits the fan, we're the guys to call to come get you out of the mess.
So people will be asking the question now, so why has Paul Webb got planned maintenance people on the call today, and he's, mainly focusing on energy management? So for people listening in today, planned maintenance is probably one of the key parts of saving energy in my books, because if you don't have a system maintained correctly, then it's going to be running wild. It's going to be running when it shouldn't be running, or it could be running too much. Like a pump, for instance, will not be sort of controlling properly, etc. It's everything in the building, isn't it? Even your lighting.
100%, Paul. If your building's not running at its optimum levels, if there's defective elements and parts that are not dealt with, it has a knock-on effect, doesn't it? And the usage can go up. Even, for instance, a basic 4-tube recessed light fitting, if you've got 2 tubes out on that 4-tube fitting, the demand on the 2 tubes that are still working and the drivers on those are going to be more, aren't they? And it's going to use more energy. And like you say, lighting's just the tip of the iceberg now, isn't it? With controllers and LEDs. Obviously, when they first came out, they were very primitive, weren't they? And it was a new technology. I remember myself as an electrician on the tools around sort of 15 years ago when they first started introducing a lot of these LED fittings. They were very hit and miss. You could probably buy 20 and have 5 that were 40, and it didn't work. Were non-starters completely. But I think now it's been very refined, hasn't it? Now, and it's been refined right down to a lot of the bigger companies are involved, and the price point has gone down on them as well, hasn't it? So they're more accessible, and there's a lot of grants involved and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So that is a big saving straight off the bat, isn't it? If you do an LED upgrade in your office space or your commercial building or even in your home, you can save a lot of money, can't you? From standard GU10 lamps, standard fluorescent lamps, you can really save some money, can't you?
Exactly. Now, the reason I was really keen to catch up with you today, Lewis, is we're now going into a second lockdown. Now, for me, this is areas where we need to be focusing on our energy management. Now, I spent the weekend in London doing some sightseeing, but I was amazed about the amount of lighting I see on during, very bright outside, but lighting, street lights, lights on top of the buildings, around the buildings was still being illuminated. And one of the things I did really notice was that there was office space fully illuminated. Now, going into lockdown, what do organisations need to be focusing on?
I think ideally, if your space is going to be unoccupied throughout the lockdown, I think a lot of these people have to look at how they're going to close down their premises for the lockdown period to reduce their energy usage. Because the last thing we want to see is lights burning brightly throughout the day in an unoccupied space, wasting all that energy. Like I say, it'd be ideally the best thing for clients to do is to then look at a sort of closure process where they look at getting engineers in to close everything down fully, because as well as the energy, there's a lot of risks for when they come back to reopening. If they don't close everything down properly, you've got Legionella risk with the water. If all the water systems are still left operational, the ventilation systems, so it can have a snowball effect, and that all has a link to the energy with the water heaters, pumps and fans. So ideally, they want to consult with their designated contractors and look at closing down their sites efficiently that are not going to be operational. And then obviously, when we do come to an end of this lockdown, look at a reopening process as well.
Yeah. Now, my local gym, for instance, when we went into lockdown and then we opened up, we found that the ceilings had all were covered in water where they've been leaking. Water systems from upstairs, but significant problems. Water's one of the biggest problems. Obviously, we're not in the buildings to see these leaks happening. When you've got buildings drying, cooling down, maybe these joints are going to start to break. So we are going to see leaks happening. So, my recommendations there is that we isolate water where possible in key areas, urinals, for instance, any flushing areas, any automation where we're seeing water being used. And it is a balance. You talked about Legionella and compliance. There is a balance between the compliance and saving energy. It's not just about, let's just pull the main switch. Let's turn off everything. We can't do that. We're actually in the middle of going into the winter now. So, if we shut down all our heating systems, it's going to be even further knock-on effects with burst pipes, and frost protection, which protects fabric.
Exactly.
So there's lots of things to consider this time going into lockdown.
There is 100%, and all those points you touched on they're very valid. That is what everyone needs to look at. Like you say, even frost protection. There's even quite new on the market frost protection systems that go in up on a roof, like box gutters and valleys and stuff like that. A lot of these modern buildings have the frost protection up there as well, so that it can help thaw out and defrost any frost or snow build up in those potential risk areas that could cause leaks into the building. Even down to pipe lagging. How many times do you see an outside tap that's not got lagging on the pipe work or a cover on the tap? And normally that's the first thing to burst, especially on domestic properties. That's the first thing to burst in the winter, isn't it? Your outside tap and the length of pipe will burst because it's so cold.
And even more so when, the biggest problem now is we're not going to be in the building. So no one's going to witness these pipes bursting, they're not going to be there. And then we're going to come back to work, and there's going to be all this water everywhere, possibly,
Exactly.
or an issue.
My best, I was going to say, Paul, my best advice to a lot of people would be, and it's something that we did, and we have been doing for a lot of our clients from the last lockdown period, is having regular checks carried out in the properties. So while they are closed, mothballed,
excellent,
have an engineer go in weekly, have a routine check all your services, check all your systems, and just make sure there isn't any underlying leaks that have gone unnoticed, especially with the AC stuff. Anything with a pump and a drip tray on the pump, that will take time to shut down. So it may say on Thursday, if someone shuts down your AC system, it may take it 2 or 3 days for the system to fully run its course and shut down properly. So by then the drip tray may have filled up and overflowed onto your ceiling, and then that's where over a week or so you'll start noticing some water staining appearing on the ceiling. So it's definitely the best course of action to have someone go in regularly and just carry out some routine checks, check everything's okay, still test your emergency lighting on a monthly basis, check that it's functioning correctly, make sure all of your life-saving systems are functioning correctly, like your fire alarm system and your sprinkler systems are all in action, because those type of systems will still need to remain functional throughout the lockdown period while your property's closed.
One area is also to focus on is your meter readings. Now, the suppliers aren't able to get in there to do the meter readings. Now, the knock-on effect of that is we're getting a lot of estimated bills. Now, I found an estimated bill recently, and it's taken us since May to actually get that rebated back. And funny enough, it was this morning we got that rebate back. It was £50,000 worth of overbilling because of estimation. Now, this is obviously a large organisation, and we're talking water, but it happens. So, why people like yourself are being called to go in and do these checks, then that's when I would recommend maybe doing meter readings on your water, your gas, and your electric. Not only is it going to be providing a reading, but then it's also then going to be able to just check compared to the previous reading if we've got any wastage going on. We'll be able to pick up water leaks. We shouldn't be using energy. We shouldn't be using water within them periods of time. So if that meter's still going and is still getting readings from it, there is obviously a leak, waste from the water or electricity or the gas. So there's good telltale points there for us to look at.
Oh, yeah, 100%. And as well, in a way, if it is identified, then this is a prime time to get that rectified as well, because obviously the properties are not, especially office spaces, they're unoccupied. If there is a pipe that's been leaking unnoticed under the floor for a period of time, in a wall, in a ceiling, it's prime time that will cause minimal disruption to the site and reduce cost as well, because it wouldn't have to be done out of hours. If it can be done in normal hours with no one in the property, then it's prime time to sort of act on that. And then it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? So it's saving on wasted utility, and it's saving on labour and time costs for doing it in hours, and disruption to the staff that would normally be working in the area.
Yeah.
So it's one of those. It's a good time to review, really, isn't it? Like you say, to review any wastage, to review any issues that may have gone unnoticed, and just to try and get your building or your property into an optimum operating way, ready for reopening at the end of lockdown.
Exactly. So, Lewis, the one thing I've written an article today. I'll be posting that later on in the week, and I couldn't believe I actually got up to about 22 points on there regarding the things to look for. From computers being left on, your printers, your photocopiers, to checking your water systems. It's a whole range of things. And what I've said there is, if people haven't got the confidence to do all this shutdown themselves, then they can call upon people like yourselves to provide that service. I don't think people realise that, there's people out there that can support them in doing this work. And not only that, it affects all buildings. So from a corner shop to an office block and everything in between there, that's where I say where we can make the impact on.
Oh, and to coin another phrase, every little helps, doesn't it, as well? And it's
Exactly.
And it's the small things that add up to the larger things, isn't it? So one light left unnoticed in one room, but if you've got 30 rooms across 15 floors, it soon adds up, doesn't it?
That is a very interesting point, because people and organisations, when I'm walking around their properties doing an energy assessment, they're amazed at me when I'm 1 minute I'm in the boiler room looking at controls and the BMS system, and then I'll go into a bathroom and I see a dripping tap and I pick the dripping tap up. They ask me, why have you picked the dripping tap? What's the issue there? And I said, well, look, how long's that dripping tap been like that? And they'll say, oh, it's probably a couple of months. We measure it. We put a little cup under there. We measure how much water. We do the calculation. And people don't realize there's 3 costs associated with that. So there's the water you're using, there's a sewage cost, and there's also, if that was a warm, hot tap dripping, there's heating cost. So if you've got a dripping tap over that period of time, you just work the sums out. It's a significant amount of cost.
It's scary how it can add up, isn't it?
It is very scary, yes. Yeah, very scary.
And it can add up very quickly as well, can't it? Without anyone really noticing. Like I say, how many people go into the communal toilet or the staff toilets and just sort of, you got a bank of six sinks, and the far end one, because this is one thing I've noticed over the years visiting different sites, office spaces, they may have east and west core, 2 toilets in each core, but you might have 8 sinks in each toilet. How many of those sinks actually all get used? Because if you've got 8, it's human nature to go to the near. You're not going to walk extra meters to the 8th sink on the run, are you? You're going to use that first sink every time. So it's vital. And with the checks, it's vital to do your flushing on the taps, because how often does that tap get used? How often does that end toilet get flushed on a bank of 6 toilets? It's that thing where everyone just goes for the easiest option, don't they? So it's always good to check these things, because that tap might be dripping on the 8th sink for a year, and you do the calculations. A tap that's been dripping for a year, like you say, based on those 3 elements, on the heating costs of the hot water, the water usage and the sewage usage, it's going to add up to a fair chunk of a bill, isn't it, if it's just left? Yeah. When it could have been quite a small cost for an engineer to come out and remove that tap and replace it for a new tap and eliminate the issue.
Totally agree. So, Lewis, look, really appreciate your time today, and I've cut into your lunch break, and well, if we get lunch breaks nowadays, because you're very busy. Really appreciate the time. Just, is there anything that you could be, is there a golden nugget you can leave for our listeners today regarding what they could be doing?
Where do I start? No, I just think the main thing is to make sure your services and equipment shut down properly if you are shutting down. But if you are leaving it running, make sure it's being checked regularly, because it's still got to be maintained. Or ensure your life-saving systems are working and functioning correctly, because they're there, that's what they're there for. They're there to save life at the end of the day. So they must be maintained properly. And just to focus, as we touched on, focus on those small maintenance tasks that, even though they may seem incidental and not necessary, they can save you money in the long run. So changing a tap, changing a faulty flush mechanism on a toilet that's slightly letting by, that ISO valve that's not quite working properly, those small tasks that are general maintenance tasks, but like I say, if they're left unaddressed, can cost you money in the long run. So just everyone, money's, there's issue like where it's not as affluent at the moment, is it? So any saving's a good saving, isn't it? So it's worth focusing on. But no, really appreciate it, Paul. Thanks for having me on, and really enjoyed it.
Lewis, I'd like to once again say thank you very much for joining me today. Planned maintenance is a significant impact on energy management. It provides a 15% saving if we do it right. If we don't do it, it could go exactly the other way. So it's very, very important. And I really welcome you coming along, give us some insights into, what's happening regarding lockdown. So, Lewis, you go and be safe with your family, and we'll speak soon, yeah? Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Paul, and likewise to yourself, mate, and great for having me on. Thanks a lot. Speak to you soon. See ya.
Thank you for joining me today on this podcast, and thank you for my special guest. Please go and check out our website on www.b2benergy.co.uk, where you can see many more insights to how you can manage that third largest expense. Thank you. That just leaves me for one more thing to say. Be safe.